Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's panel, A Closer Look at the Importance of Housing. My name is Jennifer King. I am the Executive Director at Cook County's Department of Human Rights, which houses our Cook County Commission on Human Rights. Thank you all so much for being here. We're celebrating International Human Rights Day, and this year's theme is our everyday essentials, noting the importance of rights that are essential to our daily lives. And tonight's panel is going to focus on housing as a fundamental human right, one that's connected to the health, safety, opportunity, and stability of every resident in Cook County. And we're so grateful to have you all join us for this important discussion because we each play a critical role in ensuring that everyone can access housing free from discrimination. Before we start tonight's panel, I do want to thank and recognize the National Public Housing Museum, which we're in this evening. And I'd like to introduce the Associate Director, Tiff Beatty.
Good evening, and thank you so much for being here. It's great to see some familiar faces and also lots of new faces. We love doing things like this, which is being a cultural and community anchor for folks who are part of this movement with us. So again, just on behalf of the whole team at the National Public Housing Museum, I just want to welcome you and thank you for being here and also invite you to come back. Again, my name is Tiff Beatty. I'm the program director here at the National Public Housing Museum. So I run a lot of the programs. If you've been here before, you've probably seen me up here at the mic doing a similar thing. But again, we love to also host programs for other people and also in collaboration. So thank you so much to the Cook County's Commission on Human Rights for choosing our space. Just to give you a little bit of context for where we are located in the last remaining building of the Jane Addams homes. So these pillars you see here, this is a restoration project. Our museum is made possible by the public housing residents who lived in this building and in this community in buildings just like this. And also we are fighting for housing as a human right today and the ongoing future of housing that is quality housing, that is community, that is all of the things and more that we wish for our Commonwealth. And so we are not only about public housing, but all of the good of the public and of rights. So we have housing actually in our community, in our building. So that's our closest sort of neighbors are actually share a building with us. So if you parked in the parking lot, you may have noticed that there's some resident addresses. So we do share our courtyard and our parking lot with residents, and we also collaborate with public housing residents and folks all over the country, again, to execute our mission of preserving, promoting, and propelling housing as a human right. I want to say a special shout out to the public housing. If there's any public housing current or former community residents in the room, please wave your hand. I'm talking to y'all. This is your museum. So thank you. Yes, give it up for folks who are part of this community. This is your museum. We offer free memberships to residents. And also with the memberships is a free tour. And we invite all of you all to participate in our historic apartment tours, which are a journey through history of public housing. But also we're a free museum, and so we're open to the public Wednesday through Sunday, free for anyone who wants to come in and just see our exhibits and be in community with us. So again, welcome, and we hope that you all come back, and please stay in touch, and we look forward to the program tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tiff. Thank you. I'd also like to recognize two of our Cook County commissioners who are here with us. Cook County Commissioner Tara Stamps for the 1st District. And Cook County Commissioner Dr. Keisha McCaskill for the 5th District. Good. And I want to offer them some time to come up and give remarks if they would like.
Just walked in, but this is what I do. First and foremost, thank you for coming out. I got both my roots and everything I am by being a project kid. I am a proud resident of Cabrini-O Green, 1230 North Berlin, 11th floor. And if you're from the projects, that's kind of how you associate. Like, it ain't enough to say that's where you from. They need to know your school, the floor you lived on. It's a whole thing. It's a whole magnificent, amazing culture that we don't refer to as public housing, right? You from the projects, your friends from the projects, you go to school and where the projects is, you know. But there is, our life there was so much bigger than Good Times, so much bigger than Candyman, but, you know, Cabrini comes with its own branding, right? But I also want you all to know that the end of public housing, much like the beginning of public housing, was a political decision. Public housing did not have to end. Public housing did not have to close. The people didn't fail public housing. The government failed public housing, right? And for those of us who live in the Chicago, just really, really quickly, what you saw, what we saw, what we experienced in the late 90s was actually the manifestation to something that was thought of many, many decades before, which is the Chicago 21 plan. So the Chicago 21 plan, in which Mayor Daley, Boss Daley, was the architect, called for the end of public housing by the 21st century. So it's not a mistake that Ida B. Wells and Henry Horner and Cabrini and Stateway Gardens and all of the projects that we know that lined the expressway when you would go south, there's a whole row of projects. That was not an accident. When those buildings came down, that was what was planned. And so even now, where there's nowhere else to go in this city, because the greed of the wealthy is insatiable. And so now we are finding ourselves, continually to find ourselves in a housing crisis. And I'm here to say, if we don't get housing right, we can't get anything else right. It doesn't matter how many programs we find for our children if our babies are homeless or housing insecure. It doesn't matter how many free meals we give out if people do not have housing. Does not matter how much money we put in opioid programs if people don't have housing, quality, affordable, accessible housing. And so this becomes all of our responsibility to make sure that our people, all the people, are housed, particularly in a city and in a country and in an environment that has declared war against the poor, that has declared war against women, that have declared war against unions, that has declared war against all of the pathways that many people have taken to get to the middle class or wherever this la-la land is we thought we were on our way to. But when you can, with the stroke of a pen, demolish the Department of Education, you can take away qualified jobs of 300,000 black women, many of whom are heads of households. You have to understand that we are at war in our own country. Our own country has declared war on us. And it's not about just immigrants. It's not about just black people, white people, or people of color or women. It's all of us. And so it's going to take each of us to save all of us, and that the root of that is housing. As a human right. Oh, I got to give a shout out to my mama. Long live the queen. Marion Stamps, I contributed one of her artifacts in the museum. A lot of people don't know, my mom was an activist, but she was also a motorcycle gang rider. She was about that life. She was for the streets, literally. And the museum asked many years ago when they first got started if I would contribute something. So with the permission of my sister, Guana Stamps, she allowed us to have my mother's jacket exhibited. So thank you.
Okay, everybody. So I am Dr. Keisha E. McCaskill. I'm your 5th District Cook County Commissioner. And Tara and I, Commissioner Stamps, we believe in a lot of the same things. My area covers from Roseland to Chicago Heights and Ford Heights, from South Holland to Oak Forest. I have the bulk I have 85% underserved communities, unaffordable housing issues, home insecurities, food insecurities. So when we talk about this as systemic, it's not just in Chicago, it's all the way down. So we need to start looking at that. I want you to also take a look at homelessness looks completely different. You have executive directors that are currently homeless. In our south suburbs, you have people that are losing their homes every day. So this housing insecurity, it's growing, it's not getting better. We can put as much paint on it and as much lipstick on this pig as possible. However, it's still a pig. And we need to look at it from a much different perspective. I just want to change your mind. Let you look through a different lens. As I sat here, we were discussing the paintings on the wall. They go back as far as 1940, and the same issues that were occurring in 1940, with housing being a spur of infant mortality, or homelessness, or juvenile delinquency. Those are the same issues we're fighting today. So as the panel speaks, don't just listen to hear, listen to invest. Listen to understand. Let it incubate within you and identify what should we be doing differently, because whatever we've done thus far isn't working. And we need to be very real about that and have these real conversations and not just look at how we can feed the homeless today, but what's the long-term security plan that's sustainable? Not just look at how we can get people to purchase a new home today. It doesn't matter if you give them a grant to purchase a home if they can't sustain it because they don't have a job. So again, myself and Commissioner Stamps, we come from two different sides of town, but the issues are the same and we're fighting with you. We look forward to seeing what's going to happen with the housing and how we can continue to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. I do very quickly want to recognize our Human Rights Commissioner, Charlie Isaacs, who's here with us. We really appreciate your support. And we also have representatives from Cook County Commissioners Scott Britton and Alma Anaya here. I just want to recognize them as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, our Deputy Director within the Commission, Tamaya Wright.
Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started and get into our discussion, I just want to take a moment to introduce our esteemed panelists. Tonight, first we have Andre Gordillo. Andre is Director of Family Support Network Services for the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights. You want to give him a round of applause? Yeah. Okay. Next, we have Samantha Dewberry, Community Engagement Manager and Mobility Educational Coordinator for Housing Choice Partners. Samantha. And then we have John Petruszak, who is Executive Director of South Suburban Housing Center. And I just want to note their full bios are included, and if you scan the QR codes on the screen, that has a link to their full bios. But I just wanted to give them a brief introduction. And before we get started in our discussion, I just want to note, while I am the moderator for the evening, I'm going to get the conversation started, but you all will have an opportunity to drive this conversation as well at the end. So all of our outreach team is passing out note cards for you to add questions that you may have, and then you'll be able to do that at the end, okay? So let's get into our discussion. First question for all of our panelists. To start, could each of you please provide us with a brief overview of your organizations and the work that you do? So I'll start with you, Sam.
Okay, well, I'm Samantha Dewberry. I am with Housing Choice Partners, and what we do, our mission is to help break the cycle of poverty by promoting racial and economic diversity in housing. So we run quite a few programs. My ED is in the audience right now, Miss Catherine. She's an amazing ED. Raise your hand, Miss Catherine. So what I work within, I am the Community Engagement Manager, I am the Educational Workshop Coordinator, and I am also a mobility counselor. So one of the programs that we run is contracted through the Chicago Housing Authority, and we assist housing choice voucher participants in leasing up or transitioning into what we like to call mobility communities. Another program that we assist with through Chicago Housing Authority is that we also implement the relocation project as needed. So connecting with public housing, agent or PHAs when they are transitioning from public housing, we give them the choice. The housing choice voucher gives them the choice to utilize their voucher wherever they see fit. So we counsel them one-on-one to assist them in transitioning into what we like to call mobility areas. We also assist, we run a reentry program where clients that are reentering back into society, we assist them with care packaging, housing, and all the essentials that they need to be successful transitioning back into society, mainly within their housing. We also run a rental housing support program. We do so much. And an emergency housing voucher program as well when funds are, available. So just a quick backstory with me, what I think is important for you guys to know. I started on the opposite end. So I used to work on the administration side of the Housing Choice Voucher program. So I used to, oh my God, I've done everything. I started as the clerk and I worked my way up. I've worked in the moves department. I was a housing specialist. I worked in portability. We were the first PHA to have an owner services program. We implemented that. And so on that side, you don't really get to reach the people. So everything is just paperwork, paperwork, paperwork. And my director now, Melanie Toney, she was working the mobility program. And she would come in and she would literally just harass us about these mobility moves, like what's going on with my files, they better not be late, they better be on time, my clients are ready to move. And I'm like, who is this lady? And I love her energy, but she comes in and she's just so aggressive. And I'm like, I would love to work under her one day because it's such a different dynamic working and advocating for the people in regards to just pushing paperwork. And so she finally had a position available. I transitioned over and I have been working with Housing Choice Partners for 10 years now. And it's been very, very rewarding because I'm working on the opposite side and I feel like I'm now doing the Lord's work. I'm actually helping families and, actually doing something that's impactful to my community.
And that work is so important and much appreciated. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. It's been my privilege for the last 30 years to be the executive director of the South Suburban Housing Center. We are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. It's a privilege to me because my grandparents immigrated to the south suburbs, the village of Hazelcrest 100 years ago from Ukraine, from Serbia, and from Sicily. And it's been my privilege to serve that area that accepted my families. So we were started 50 years ago by the League of Women Voters who were concerned about realtors who were steering people by race to certain subdivisions and communities in the south suburbs. That's what got us going. We serve the whole South Cook area, including portions of the south side of the city of Chicago, all of Kankakee in Will County, and several places in central Illinois that are not served by anybody. And we've also taken on service in Lake County, Indiana. So we have a very large service area, a lot of people to serve. We have two main programs, our Fair Housing Enforcement Program and our Comprehensive Housing Counseling Program. We are a HUD certified counseling agency. Our mission is to address all forms of discrimination in the housing market and to foster long-term stable diversity. And all of our programs are aimed at those goals. Our Fair Housing Enforcement programs are very busy. We were initially trained by the Leadership Council for Metropolitan Open Communities to provide those services, and we're just one of half a dozen organizations that are doing fair housing enforcement in the Chicago area right now. We conduct testing programs to investigate complaints of discrimination. We do a lot of intake and sort through people's problems that they're having, and then we try to resolve the situations through informal methods. And if that's not possible, we go to the formal complaint process, filing complaints with the Cook County Commission, with the Chicago Commission, with the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and with HUD. We also are involved a lot in educating people on their fair housing outreach activities involved in educating landlords about their responsibilities under the Fair Housing Act and under the local ordinances to protect people. Our counseling programs are also kind of hand in hand with our enforcement programs. We do fair housing education at all our homebuyer classes. We are involved in doing education about preventing people from getting into delinquency and foreclosure. And we do rental placement and education programs also. Through our fair housing programs and litigation we've been able to get monetary damages to assist communities. I'm very proud of the fact that over the last 10 years, we've been able to distribute $1.9 million in down payment assistance and mortgage distress assistance grants. So over 200 grants over that period to the most distressed communities in the south suburbs. So, and one of the things that I'm most proud of is during the pandemic, we shifted all of our emphasis to get involved in Cook County programs and several programs with IDA to provide emergency rental and mortgage assistance. I think that was probably our finest moment.
Thank you so much, John, and congratulations on the 50-year anniversary. Andre?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So yeah, I work for the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. And we're a nonprofit advocacy group mainly, also doing a lot of policy work, organizing, campaigning. Many of you may have seen us in the news yesterday. There was a bill signed by Governor Petruszak, and so we were pivotal with that. But my role specifically is I help with our family support network, which is a one-stop shop. It's a hotline, and you can go to our website as well, but geared, of course, towards immigrants, but they can call and get assistance with a variety of issues. Of course, now it's everything that's happening in our country with immigration-related deportations and stuff. So, but it's been around for 15 years, and originally it was set up to be a one-stop shop for folks to get assistance with housing issues, with workplace issues, with school issues, etc. So it's been great to be there. I've been there for a little under 6 months, but one of the reasons why I think I was invited here was I helped prior to ICIRR. I was working at New Life Centers, which is another nonprofit, and we were involved with the new arrival mission, where I led a team of about 200 staff that moved people. If you all remember, 58,000 new arrivals from the southwest border arrived to our city. We're bused from Texas. New Life Centers was on the resettlement side. So we worked very closely with IDA, with the city, with IDHS, with Catholic Charities and other partners to resettle about 6,500 families across the state. Many in South Suburban, Cook County, West Side, right? And we can go on and on about how that was handled, but we're really just that last piece and logistically handled the moving people from shelters into their new home. And so, yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Andre. And thank you, all of our panelists. The work that you do is so important in the space, and we are very grateful for all of you. So moving on to our second question then, what are some barriers that you think the communities that you serve face currently as it relates to finding or maintaining housing? And we'll start with you, Andre.
Yeah, so for the immigrant populations that we primarily serve, I think first of all, it's a lot of them have a lack of status, right? So they don't have a credit score. How are you going to find an apartment if the person, the landlord, requires a credit score? And so lack of documentation, right? They don't have proof of income for 2 years because maybe they just came here 18 months ago. So how can they prove that they're going to be able to pay rent? So that's probably number one. Number two is income volatility. So many of these people we serve work in snow removal, They work in landscaping. They work odd jobs, cash jobs, and they are day laborers, and so they don't have the steady income. Or if they do, there's also many cases of people calling us that they've been exploited at work, that their boss isn't paying them the full wage that they were promised. The third thing is language access. Continues to be an issue. I think Illinois has done a good job of providing so many materials. Like at the resource fair, there was materials in multiple languages, but there's still a long way to go with that. And then I think we all know this here is the lack of legal support if and when there are issues. And so accessible legal support, low cost legal support, those are probably the four things I would say.
Thank you so much. John?
Well, historically, the primary service area that we serve in the South Cook County area are majority communities of color. They've been impacted by historic patterns of discrimination that started on the south side of the city, where blockbusting and panic petting were terms that were coined by realtors. Those practices came further south as African Americans who were looking for the ideal suburban life came to the south suburbs. But those steering practices intensified segregation, and we were affected by a number of discriminatory factors in the lending market, where predatory loans were a big part of the discrimination that robbed individuals of their equity in their homes. And then we had the mortgage foreclosure crisis around 2008, and the mortgage market crashed. There was housing values that fell drastically, decreasing economic development, decreasing the tax bases for local municipalities. And there were heightened rates of default and foreclosure. We had the highest rates of foreclosure in the south suburbs for a 5-year period, even higher than any neighborhood in the city of Chicago. Displaced homeowners became renters, and in communities and in neighborhoods in the city with limited multifamily facilities to house them, and single-family homes not available or affordable to be rented. And this exacerbated our housing availability crisis. Now, this is the downer part of my answer, but I will have some more a light at the end of the tunnel in a later response.
Yes, we start with the challenges first, and then we promise it'll get better from here. So, what about you, Sam?
For time purposes, because anybody that knows me know I can go all day. So barriers, mainly discrimination based on source of income. I work with a lot of voucher participants and a lot of landlords, just the stigma attached to it, period. Just saying the term will basically turn a landlord off and will, make them ghost that potential tenant going forward. So I'm really big on educating voucher holders and voucher families on knowing the ins and outs of your PHA, so then you can market your housing authority to potential landlords, because some landlords are just unaware of how it works. And then hearing the stories from other landlords, some landlords have never even worked with the program before, but they've just heard stories from other landlords, and it turns into a folk tale where it went from Cheerios in one vent, and then they tell a story and tell a story and tell a story. Now it's the landlord had to change the whole ventilation system because it was Cheerios out throughout the whole house, and that was not the case. So the more you're educated on the PHA and the housing authority that you're attached to, the better you can then market yourself to potential landlords, so you can kind of, educate the miseducated, because that's what I do. When I talk to landlords, and I don't care if I'm in the nail shop and someone sees my ID and they like, ooh, you work for CHA? And I'm like, ooh, you say that to say what? And before I'm done, everybody in there wants, Ms. Dewberry's card, because it's about educating the miseducated, because it's so many stereotypes attached to voucher families that are just untrue. It's just untrue. Another big barrier is family status. So whether they have a voucher or not, if you're a mom and you have, let's say, 5 children, a landlord is gonna, assume certain things, that you don't keep your house together, or is gonna be wear and tear. If you're a mom or a parent that has smaller children, they're gonna assume that, it's gonna be noise violations, it's gonna be wear and tear, cart crayons on the wall and things like that. So it's a lot of different factors, but source of income and family status would be the biggest one for me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all for sharing those challenges. And Sam, I'm glad you mentioned education. I think that is very important, and that segues into my next question, which is, what do you consider to be the most important housing laws? And it's a two-part question. What are the most important housing laws everyone should know about? And then, how do you think they address the challenges faced by the communities that you serve?
I'm torn, and like I said, my ED is here, so I have to tread lightly on what I say. But working with voucher families, of course, source of income would be the one that I would. However, I've noticed that working alongside reentry with a few of my colleagues, that whether or not you have a voucher or not, you can have a person of color with a voucher and a non-person of color with a voucher, and that non-person of color is going to have a harder time, an easier time with finding housing, whether they have a voucher or not. So that says something in itself. So I think the just cause is really good to have, because it helps balance that. It's like even in the playing field for, like John said, with kind of virtual, I guess, rearing the systematic racism, where that gives that family that chance, because it's so hard for people of color to get an approval. And it's just statistically shown. And so having that just cause amendment will help, or kind of streamline landlords to be able to look past, things that if you did something and you did your time, you came back, you're transitioning into society, you should be able to have stable housing just like everyone else. So I think my job, I would say source of income. But on a personal level, on, just where I think that it's needed, I think that just cause is definitely doing some justice.
That's very helpful perspective. Thank you so much. And John, I would ask you the same question, and then Andre, I have a different question for you.
I'm going to echo a lot of what Samantha was just saying. We in recent years, there's 7 basic protected classes under federal law, but Cook County and the state of Illinois have several more expanded classes. Those expanded classes are the types of complaints that we are receiving, and all the fair housing enforcement agencies in the metropolitan area are receiving at a greater frequency these days, and that is source of income violations and criminal history violations. We have all been looking at these very, very closely, doing what we call systemic investigations on large rental management companies, and working together in the city with agencies all over the city to try to address these problems. But source of income and criminal history are the 2 hottest areas that we're dealing with as far as housing discrimination in our metropolitan area right now.
Thank you, John. So Andre, different question. Outside of existing remedies in law, what other resources exist for communities to address these challenges?
Yeah. So we work closely with at ICER. We work closely with Illinois Welcome Centers, and if you're not familiar with those are set up by the state of Illinois as one-stop shops for people to physically go in and speak to someone. And we're a member organization, so we're an umbrella group. There's 100+ members from Lake County down south, southern Illinois. So we work with all of our agencies across the state so that we can navigate. We get calls and emails all the time. I live so-and-so, can you connect me? I'm past due on rent, whatever it is. So the navigation between the agencies so that they can go to one place whatever that is. That's maybe Erie House here on the west side, and they can talk to someone, a case manager there, and get connected, and that person can kind of do kind of the hand-holding. The emergency financial assistance is really critical, especially as we are seeing so many families. They said 3,000 people were detained. We're getting calls every day of people scared to go to work, unable to make rent. And so what resources are there to help me make rent? And mutual aid too has been really critical too. And going back to the education, the Know Your Rights education is critical. And we've worked with some people, MTO and others, to do that for tenants. But yeah, I think those are going to be the three things. The community navigation, working with our agencies to do a lot of that help, because again, they don't know the languages. Immigrants might not be familiar with our systems. I mean, most people aren't familiar with all the different agencies in play. And then the financial assistance, that mutual aid, emergency help, and then the education is critical.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I agree with all of the things that you all have shared. I think the education is key. Half the battle a lot of the time is getting the information out there and making sure that people are aware of what rights they have and what resources are available to them. So thank you all. My next question, and this one is for you, Sam, first. What do you think are the most common misunderstandings or compliance issues as it relates to fair housing laws?
Okay, 2 minutes, right?
If you can.
Okay. The first thing is that landlords just don't think that it's their responsibility. And a lot of times they're hiring licensed professionals, brokers, managers, because they're assuming that they are, they're going to uphold certain fair housing laws and protections. However, brokers, licensed professionals, from what I'm seeing lately in the last, 5 years, they're assuming that we don't know those laws and protections. So they're playing right along with a voucher holders that's calling and saying, hey, do you take Section 8? Where they shouldn't be calling and asking that in the first place, because if the foundation of that property is in the state of Illinois, they don't have a choice. They can't say that they don't want to take it. So people will sometimes do what you allow them to do to you, and they're playing right into the fact that they don't know. Another thing is that landlords don't know who the laws protect. So a lot of times when landlords hear fair housing, they think of automatically eviction or RLTO or things like that. They don't even know that it's a whole nother umbrella to, fair housing that's not necessarily tenants, landlord issues, but it's more so related to, implementing discriminatory practices or discriminating against a certain demographic of people. So they don't understand the law in itself. And the last one is unintentional noncompliance. So we have management companies that sometimes think that they're housing specialists. So to streamline their, organizations, to make it easier, one of the things that just it burns my bacon, that's what my grandmother says, is that housing providers have found a way to change the way in which this process goes. They are the ones that are working on a transaction, so they get paid off of this transaction. But they found a way to streamline this situation to make the tenant work harder and make their lives easier. And that's not how it should go. So again, educating landlords and participants or tenants, anybody looking for housing, whether they're a voucher holder or not, letting them know how this game is played and who the players are, so they know when people are, mistreating them, or they're able to identify when, discrimination occurs. So just an example of how a management company would do this, they would say, oh, well, we'll calculate your tenant portion. And if your tenant portion is too high, then we're not going to move forward with you. You're not a housing specialist. You never, passed the NARO exam, so you don't know how to do those calculations. Or they'll implement certain practices where if the rent determination is not done within this time frame, then we're going to cancel the move. And so usually they know that PHAs are not going to march to the beat of your drum, and it takes time. It takes in minimum 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending upon what time of the year it is, and that's what they're doing. They're doing that just so they can deter voucher holders from putting down that deposit and losing their money, because they can't anticipate how long the process is going to take. And that's their way of kind of, making an obstacle without making an obstacle. And when we work with enforcement, because enforcement and housing go hand in hand, like John said, when we work with enforcement agencies, it's very hard hard for us to be able to, or them to be able to identify the discrimination, because they put it in there that way, so it's like covered up, so you can't really say, well, that's not discriminatory because it's a time frame thing. What if somebody else comes in, or they come up with all these different excuses? So that would be my 2 reasons.
Thank you, Sam. And then, John, I'm going to come back to you, I promise. But Andre, I want to ask you another question on that note, based on what Sam was saying. How do resources, or the lack of available resources, have impacts on communities in the fair housing space?
Yeah, I think you could write a whole book. Well, like, bottom line, when there are resources, I think when we saw, especially with this new arrival mission that I worked in, families can move from crisis to stability. And I think that's something that often wasn't shared, is that when we gave people, when the state, for a brief period of time, there was a rental assistance program that the state had, ACE-RAP. It was less expensive for them to be on their own, self-sustainable, than propping up these shelters, which costs, we all know, millions of dollars. So when these resources exist, these families it was a humanitarian crisis they were fleeing, right? No fault of their own. They were looking for assistance, and the state of Illinois provided that. I think we did a great job compared to other parts of the country. So when there aren't resources, I think one problem becomes many, right? The job loss turns into owing 3 months' rent. That becomes into eviction. That becomes homelessness. So it doesn't help too. And John and I were talking before this, the under-resourcing or potential loss of funding, that's hurtful, having to navigate that. And when there aren't resources, we see what happens, especially with new arrivals, is they double, triple up. And then that becomes unsafe, unlawful. And so, it's overcrowded, children move to schools, or children move schools, often health deteriorate, we can go on and on, but when there are resources, I think people are able to take that next step and move out of crisis.
Thank you so much, Andre. I think we could go on and on all day, but yeah, you're absolutely right. So I want to, John, ask you a new question. What are some challenges that your organization faces in your work to ensure everyone has access to fair housing?
I could say this has been a very challenging year since January.
I can imagine.
It started out in February, February 27th, a night that will be etched in my memory forever, when we got this email after hours from HUD telling us that 2 of our fair housing grants were being eliminated. Because our enforcement of the Fair Housing Act was no longer a priority or policy of HUD. I just couldn't believe the wording of this. This is just incredible. We bound together with agencies throughout the country. Half of the fair housing grants that the federal government was given were eliminated that night. We were able to successfully get into court quickly, get a TRO within 2 weeks, and get those funds restored. And then we wound up having to sue HUD a second time to make sure that HUD was still distributing money that Congress had appropriated to all fair housing agencies throughout the country, but that the current administration did not agree should be distributed. So we have at this point in time been able to sustain our funding throughout this year, and we should have funding to continue us probably halfway into next year. But the big issue is what happens when Congress comes up with a new budget. That's when the administration, and right now the House of Representatives, wants to zero us out completely and not provide these services to individuals. The private fair housing organizations are doing the most in the infrastructure to enforce the law. We handle 75% of the complaints brought nationally. We sort through all of these situations, and the money, the small amounts of resources that are given to us, which is only federally only $50 million a year for all of the agencies throughout the country, is being used very effectively by all of the organizations. So what we're threatened is HUD pulling these resources away, and I will later on tell you how we are right now making sure that we can make sure that we have fair housing programs here in Illinois by diversifying our funding source and making sure that we're not relying as much on federal funds.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Okay, so as I promised, I want to end on a positive note. So with those challenges being shared, what are some ways that we, and I mean government agencies, all of us, individuals, can help support the work that you all do? We'll start with you, Sam. And also, two-part question. First, let's go back and say, why do you think fair housing is important? Why should everyone care about access to fair housing? And then how can we all support?
Mainly because it affects more than just where we live. Like everyone's safety, their access to good schools and jobs, and just overall opportunity to thrive. Our babies should be able to thrive just like some other babies are able to thrive and not live off of a survival mode, like Commissioner Stamps was saying. Everyone should be able to have access to stable housing. And if we don't, it's not just their problem, it's an everyone's problem. So that would be the first thing for the first question. And the second question would be donations, philanthropy. Spreading the word. I'm really big on education. So if you have an organization, or I don't care if it's a church or something, if you want the word out, if you want education out, HCP is there to get. If we are like-minded in our mission, that's very important. If we are like-minded in our mission, if we are servicing, the same people, if we're out here doing the Lord's work, I am all for educating, because it's not about just telling one person, it's about empowering you, so you feel empowered enough to tell another person, to empower them, to tell another person. So let's change that narrative. That's all. That's my biggest thing, is donating. Oh, and partnerships. If any organizations want to partner, me being the community engagement manager, I'm learning how strengthening your networks with other organizations that are like-minded, that may have better funding, lesser funding, but you may have funding in one area, I may have funding in another area. You may have, strengths in your colleagues in one area, I may have strengths in another. So it's about coming together, networking to get the word out.
Thank you so much. So you all have your marching orders. We're going to donate, we're going to partner, and we're going to educate. John?
Two-part question?
Yes.
Okay. I'll start out with talking about why fair housing is so important. And that is that there was a campaign that the National Fair Housing Alliance had a few years back called "Zip Codes Should Not Determine a Child's Future," and it was a picture of a number of diverse group of elementary school age kids on a playground. And the point of this photograph was to make sure that people realize that all neighborhoods do not afford the same opportunities and resources, the same quality schools, transportation, housing, healthcare, food, and jobs. But the best way to improve communities and to make sure that everybody has a fair chance to succeed is by enacting and enforcing fair housing laws that would create diversity in the housing market. And this is also the same concept behind mobility counseling. Voucher holding families improve their fair access to housing in the opportunity areas by being protected by fair housing laws. So then the second part is, how can you support our work? Well, you can support our work by supporting what we're trying to do right now, and that is diversifying our funding source so that we can keep implementing fair housing programs throughout the state of Illinois. We formed the fair housing organizations in the metropolitan area have formed a new organization called the Illinois Housing Equity Collective. We've gotten seed money from the Chicago Community Trust to go forward with planning for working jointly to provide fair housing programs, not only in the Chicago metropolitan area, but throughout the state. And we've been approaching philanthropic foundations to do this, and we have a strategy for introducing legislation in the General Assembly in the next session, so that the state is a part of providing funding. And we have very good examples from two other states, New York and Michigan, that are doing this right now. So we need to get away from relying completely on the federal government, because it might not always be there to be able to implement these necessary fair housing programs throughout the state. We ask for you to support those efforts. Individuals, we ask for local government agencies to help us, and we ask for elected officials also.
Perfect. Thank you so much, John. So again, everyone, we're going to donate, we're going to partner, and we're going to spread the word. Andre?
Yeah, I think I would echo what's been said already. To answer your first question, why should everyone care? First of all, it's not just a moral issue, but a public systems issue. And like what was said earlier, especially Commissioner Stamps said it really well. But when families are housed, emergency room visits are fewer. Schools see fewer disruptions. So neighborhoods are more stable and safer. And when they're not, that's where the public systems have to absorb the costs. So health declines, children fall behind, all that. So I think it all starts with housing. Then how can people support? I think individually, education, people knowing their rights, both on the tenant and landlord side. Intervene just as an individual. If there's something wrong, you see something, say something. So you witness discrimination, calling the people that are in charge of doing and investigating, supporting the organizations that many of us work for, volunteering, giving for the funders and nonprofits and government agencies. I think it's investing upstream, right? Not just responding to crisis. Yes, we need those funds, but how can we prevent it up front? I think that's critical. And treating housing instability, to Samantha's earlier point, it's not a personal moral failure, but it's a systems failure. And so funding legal aid, funding the things up front as much as possible to prevent what happens later on is critical.
Thank you so much. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So thank you all so much. Those are very good answers. And my takeaway is that we all have a role to play. So, as all of our panelists have shared, we all can do our part by sharing the information and helping any way that we can. So I want to open it up to Q&A. Any questions that you all may have? Are we collecting, or are we just going to? Yeah, okay. So we'll just take a moment to review some of the questions.
And real quick, if there are any other questions floating around in the room, we'll be collecting them. So just a moment.
Okay. And I'll try to be as brief as possible, because I know it's late, it's cold, and yeah, we all. Okay.
This question is kind of two-part. We try to condense it as much as possible.
Okay.
And I would just like to give a round of applause
Okay.
to these ladies, because they put on a great event today.
Thank you all. Okay, gotcha. So 3 or 4. Okay. Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Okay, so our first question is, how do you all address the epidemic of homelessness with legislation and/or other means? I guess that's a general question. I guess maybe John, we'll turn to you first on that question. You want to answer? Oh, I'm sorry? Oh, we had to condense it a little bit in the interest of time. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Well, yes, ma'am. Would you like to then Yes, please. Sure. Let's see. It's on the blue card. Okay. We'll pass it back. Yeah. Okay. You want to pass that back, please?
How do you end the epidemic of homelessness without a state right to counsel law that's fully funded, state rent control, the criminalization of eviction fraud for every count with a felony, 10 years, excuse me, $10,000 to $100,000 K, fines, and 10 years to life for this genocide, and for the judges, also for the judges, and housing as a human right and no-fault evictions.
Okay, that was a little bit of a long question, but maybe we can,
How do you end the epidemic of homelessness without a fully funded state right to counsel, without state rent control, without the criminalization of eviction fraud for every count with a felony from 10 to 100K fines and 10 years to life? Also for the judges to be criminally penalized for this genocide, and how can you end the epidemic of homelessness without housing as a human right and no-fault evictions?
okay. Do any of our panelists want to address maybe a part of the question, or, yeah. And then, if not, we may not be able to answer everything today, but we can certainly continue the conversation
Yeah,
and submit these questions later
Yeah,
on.
I can't address all of those
Yeah.
things, but I think the basic thing that I can address is that we have a housing crisis. There isn't enough housing. There isn't enough affordable housing. There isn't enough housing that's being built to house everybody that needs, to meet the needs of everybody. And I think we need to be working in whatever way we can to make sure that the elected officials in the federal government, all levels of government, are working toward providing more housing, more affordable housing throughout the country.
And then I also just very quickly just think connecting with homelessness prevention programs that may not always be funded by the government. So like John said, that there are a lot of organizations that their mission is to prevent homelessness, and they get funds that are not necessarily, that come from the government. So it's about partnering with, organizations, because I've referred a lot of clients, not necessarily through a professional aspect, but people that I know that work at church, that I go to church with and things like that. I've helped transition them over to homelessness prevention programs where they still have housing now.
Okay, and then,
Criminalization of eviction fraud, which is the biggest driver of homelessness, is going to continue. Homelessness is not a human right, and there is no right to counsel that's a state law, and those are the biggest drivers to this homeless crisis that's been manufactured by the political sociopaths that's been paid off, including the judges.
thank you so much for that. So we're going to go on to the next question. What programs are available to someone who is a low-income homeowner to do repairs and maintain their homes on the north side of Chicago when, all of the programs are designated, I believe, to the south and west side? Anyone
Well,
want to
I
take
know
a
that
stab?
I'm a homeowner, and I applied for several this year. So, and I live in South Shore, so I know I applied for one that helps with windows. The city is really good at assisting. I don't know how it's been. I've just become a homeowner, so I've just started noticing, certain things and looking up certain things. But I know my grandmother is a homeowner. I've been doing, applications for her since I was like 17. So there are a lot of things that you can do by going to the city, getting information, and connecting with people that work within city organizations. So especially if you're a senior, I know seniors have a lot of support with the city. They have the FSSS program. And I think that's catered just towards seniors. So there are a lot of different things through the city that you can do. And if you know property owners and investors, they know so many different ways to get, pipes done, get your concrete redone, just education and connecting with people that, work in that industry so they can help you get the access and the resources.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think there's so many resources and programs that just fly under the radar. So it's about educating yourself, looking stuff up. I think a first place to go to would be your alderman or alderperson's office, talking to them and their staff. Internet search, but yeah, the city and the county and the state, there are many resources. So it just takes sometimes a bit of doing your homework to find it.
Thank you so much. And last question that we'll take tonight, and then our panelists will be around to address any other questions that you may have. What are some ways that your organizations can address systemic racism and other barriers in our legislative practices? And are you working at all with your state representatives? So what is your plan in that space? If any of you could talk to that.
Well, we've certainly been working a great part of my career with our federal elected officials on systemic racism and trying to bring about changes and improvements in the way that the Federal Fair Housing Act is applied toward that. And basically, we've had to do that mainly through litigation and through developing precedents in court. And I must say that, you know, that continues. Regardless of what the president thinks his executive orders do to the law, his executive orders don't change the law. The courts do. Or in Congress enacting new laws, but the courts interpret those laws, and they can't be changed by executive order. So I think it's important for everybody to realize that we need to keep continuing to uphold the precedents that we've established since the Fair Housing Act was enacted back in 1968. And those protections go forward regardless of this blip that we're in right now with this administration.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Really quickly. In our organization, we get down in the dirt. We work on policy. So, no title is ever too big or too small. My executive director, our executive director at the time, my director, I myself, we testify with the Cook County Commissioners to get source of income at a county level. So we were walking down, Michigan Avenue with signs, and we've worked alongside like-minded organizations like my friend Sharon here, who's an organizer. She works in policy. So you can actually work on the policy. If there are things that you think that will make, your life easier, will make what in which you do, like I said, us working with housing choice voucher participants. At the time, we were working on an emergency voucher program in Cook County, and we were working alongside of Cook County Housing Authority, I think. And so we saw the need of having it at a county level. And so we pushed for it, and we worked with the National Associations of Realtors. We did a lot of work to get that policy pushed at a county level. So you can do that as well.
Perfect. Thank you all. This discussion was so important, and thank you for the work that you do. Can we give our panelists another round of applause? It's so important. Yes. And I hope you all have enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to our executive director to make some closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Can we get another round of applause for our panelists and our moderator? I will keep it brief because I know that everyone has things to do. We just are so grateful that everyone came out to join us in this conversation, and that we have so many peer agencies as well as just other partners, whether within the county with our commissioners, our Justice Advisory Council, of course, our Human Rights Commissioner, and other advocates that are in the room. And of course, this is an issue that impacts not just one group of people, it impacts all of us. Right? So while this panel is over, this conversation will not end. Of course, we couldn't get to everything this evening, but we hope to continue this conversation, whether it's us convening in this space or once we leave this space, going and having this conversation with those in our networks, right? Our family members, our friends, those that we encounter, and talking about the importance of housing as a human right. I do want to recognize very quickly the DHRE team. They did such a great job this evening. Pretty much our entire department is here. So I do really want to thank them in the hours that they've dedicated to this work. And that is all. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to take your thank you bags. They also include a lot of information, not just about our commission, but also about the work that's being done. Oh, yes, thank you. At other agencies and organizations. And please, feedback is always necessary. If you have time, please scan the code and provide some feedback on this event and things that you would like to see in the future. And thank you again so much to our panelists. We really do appreciate them sharing their wealth of knowledge on this topic. Thank you and have a great evening, everyone.